Hey class, today we're going to talk about the heirs to the Roman Empire, basically how Europe changed from 400 to 600 AD. As I posed to you guys in class, this thought experiment, two parts to it. What would be the effects of the disintegration of the Western Roman Empire on the people and society, and what would be the effects of the introduction of new migrants into the former Western Roman Empire, are both things that, these are two questions that are going to be answered in the course of this video today. The effects of the disintegration of Western Roman Empire, as you'll recall when we talked about the fall of Rome in class, and we did that activity of power ranking the 8 different reasons for the fall of Rome. One of the reasons was these incoming Germanic tribes settling throughout the old Roman Empire. Ostrogoths settled in Italy, Saxons in England and northwest Germany, Visigoths in Spain, Vandals in North Africa, Franks, of course, in what would become France, as this map indicates. This was important because you can't forget that there's, 120 million people, probably a little bit less than that by the time Rome fell in the late 400s AD. But you're talking about millions of people, of Romans that are living there, and then you have these incoming migrating non-Roman, quote, barbarians coming into the picture as well. In many cases, gravitating, as you look on the map, towards the Mediterranean part of the Roman Empire, for reasons we'll talk about here in a sec. The effects of the disintegration of the Western Roman civilization. So first, you lose the border protection. These migrants come into the empire unimpeded. But civilization largely failed, and I mean civilization in the means that we talk about civilization in class, what a food surplus brings. If you have a food surplus, you have the ability to have specialized workers. You have the ability to have big cities with complex institutions, all of that kind of stuff. The failure of the food surplus and the resulting trade disruption from a fall of the government leads to a population drop. We're talking about a die-off, okay? A breakdown of government and other civil institutions results in lots of Romans dying. They die because in many cases the government failed to be able to provide food for them because the government disappeared. The civil municipalities couldn't provide food for the people. The people fled the cities. Worker specialization failed. What good was it to be an artist in Rome in the late 400s, early 500s, when there was nobody to support you? You had to eat. So you became a farmer again. People went back to farming. They had to survive. You also had a change in government form. We've talked about citizenship versus subjecthood. Citizenship stopped meaning anything because the Roman Empire disappeared. There was no state to be a citizen of. Now personal loyalty was the most important thing. You have these incoming Germanic chiefs who were laying claim to large areas of land, who had bands of warriors personally loyal to them, okay? This high obligation to a leader as opposed to a more diffuse loyalty to a state is a key political change in this time period. Because there wasn't a state to belong to. Almost all the Roman political institutions failed, okay? That results in a power vacuum. And that power vacuum, since you didn't have a centralized state, the power vacuum is filled by those people who control land. Okay, now, why was control of land so important? Well, I'd like you to answer that as our first question on our Google Classroom, or excuse me, on our Google form. Answer that question. Why does power goes to those who control land? What's so important about land? And what kind of land are we talking about? Okay, pause the video. I'm assuming you've paused the video, answer the question. Now let's move on. Economic effects of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Cities shrink as law and order breaks down. Well, the cities are shrinking because there's no food there. People can't survive. Trade and travel become so dangerous and unsafe because the people who flee the cities either die because they can't farm, or they pick up weapons and steal the production of others for themselves, essentially becoming bandits. This general lack of order is one of the primary reasons why so many people turn to these incoming Germanic chieftains to assert order in a very local sense. Okay, economies become extremely local in most of Northern and Western Europe. There's just not a lot of trade going on because it's so unsafe to travel. You have a loss of knowledge and learning. The incomers were illiterate. The people already in Rome who may have been literate didn't have time to read and wouldn't pass that on to the next generation. They were too busy trying to survive. Literacy is a luxury. It's a luxury that most of these people couldn't afford. The only place where some written knowledge was preserved was in monasteries. In the West, anyways, were in monasteries. The Eastern Roman Empire preserved knowledge, of course, for the next 1,000 years. And after 632, the Arabic world, the Caliphate that we've talked about, first the Umayyad, then the Abbasid, preserved and, in fact, celebrated knowledge in a way that helped Europe get back on its feet in about 800 years by way of the Renaissance and basically a reintroduction of all these ancient Greek and Roman texts and, frankly, Arabic knowledge, some Indian and Chinese translations. All of this becomes super important in the Renaissance, which we'll talk about second semester. Another effect of the fall of the Western Roman Empire is a population shift. In the short run, in the local arena, the patrician families, the Roman nobility, if you will, move to the countryside. Why? Because it's a lot safer than the cities, and there's more food in the countryside. If you'll recall, patricians were often quite wealthy. The patrician families were often quite wealthy. They'd have places in the cities, places in the countryside. If they had a loyal band of soldiers to help them or a loyal band of retainers, they might be able to offer protection to the local farmers who in return would produce for them. They also intermarried with the incoming Germanic leaders. The Germanic leaders received a veneer of respectability by marrying into these ancient Roman patrician families. And of course, what did the Roman nobility get out of marrying into these Germanic war bands, the war chiefs who had loyal warriors? Well, answer that question on the document as well. These combinations often become the future nobility of Europe. These families become the basis of some of the famous noble families that can trace their lineage all the way back. There's also a shift of power from southern Italy and the Mediterranean lands to northern Europe. Look, let's be honest about this. The Germanic invasions, there was a lot less wealth in the north of Europe. Thus, there was less to loot, and there was less destruction to have to rebuild from. There was less loss in the northern European areas. The Ostrogoths, the Vandals, they went to these settled areas that had been, civilized and with lots of stuff built up in Italy and northern Africa for 1,000 years. That wasn't the same in northern Europe, which had been, quote, civilized or Romanized for only a couple hundred years. The development of the heavy plow is a really important development 100 or 200 years down the road here, because it allows for agriculture in the much more heavily forested north. If you're having a plow, you've got to be able to clear a field and then cut through all these roots and all, the soil's a little thicker, a little more clay mixed in. The point is, a little more rocky. The point is that the land, it's easier to farm in this area versus the exhausted territory down south. Larger populations thus develop faster in the north than they recover in the south. And with more population, once you establish a stable food supply, you can get some worker specialization going again, and you can start developing civilization more readily. So who benefits from the fall of Rome? Well, obviously these incoming local warlords, whether they're ancient Roman patrician families or incoming Germanic war chiefs, or some mix of the both, whoever had the military strength seized and controlled lands. Okay. The second group that benefited most from the fall of the Western Roman Empire was a rise of the Catholic Church. The only Roman institution to survive the fall of the empire was the Catholic Church. It provides this continuity or link between the Western Roman Empire and a post-Western Roman Empire world. Think of this. You are a peasant. You are a townsperson. Your entire world has collapsed around you. There is no certainty. There seems to be fear and risk and hopelessness everywhere. The only thing you have to hold on to for regular people is your faith in the Catholic Church, which seems unchanged. And that is a very powerful thing. The church also preserves knowledge of some of the Roman and Greek thinkers. We talked about this when we talked about Greek philosophy. There was certain philosophers that were, a little bit more favorably looked upon by the Catholic Church, and thus their stuff was preserved. Otherwise, books often ended up in the fire. They're great kindling. If you were illiterate, a book was kindling. The church preserved a fair amount of knowledge, or surprisingly a large amount of knowledge in their monasteries. As time went on, as we got out of the 400s into the 500s and beyond, the remnants of Roman authority, preserved by, again, these Roman nobility or the Catholic Church, was used to bolster these new Germanic authorities. And again, these commoners who are cast adrift in this new world cling to their Roman institution of the Catholic Church as much because, quite frankly, their lot in life has descended. They've become a lot less important in the grand scheme of things. And they have something to look forward to. The Catholic Church is teaching them, hey, look, the meek shall inherit the earth. The low will become at the right hand of the Father, and all this kind of stuff, because their reward was in the afterlife. Their reward was not in this life, but it gave them some hope. You can't make it very far without hope in this life. The Catholic Church recognized that the conversion of the incoming Germanic peoples over generations was key to their continued sense of power and their place in society. The church came to terms with the invaders. They adopted some Germanic ways and blended their church teachings with these new, frankly, pagan ways. And in an effort to bring more pagans into the fold, was flexible. And that's how the Catholic Church survived, their flexibility. The conversion was also key because with their conversion, more power came to the church. Okay, these kings and Germanic war chiefs would bend their knee to the church to receive the blessing of this great institution, the seemingly eternal institution. And that was really important to lighten the load on some of these little guys, the commoners, in the years and decades and centuries to come. We'll talk about it tomorrow in class a little bit more, and I'll see you then.